Welcome to Pressure Points. Our topic today is previewing Apple's March quarter. They're going to be reporting on Thursday, May 2nd, after the close. And the pressure point is related to Capex spending. Other topics we'll talk about is just the broader demand environment for Apple. And next we'll talk about AI products coming in the fall. We'll preview what's going on with the capital return, and lastly talk about regulation. So bringing it to the top, the pressure point is Capex. You might have to do a double take when you hear that, because typically when we talk about Apple, we don't talk about the pressure point of Capex. But of course, that was a narrative last week with big tech earnings in terms of how they are spending more related to Capex, and related specifically, of course, to be building generative AI. Apple in 2023, as we all know, was surprisingly quiet on the AI front. That's an understatement. They never mentioned it in their prepared remarks on their earnings calls. They would respond during Q&A to questions around AI. Some of that secretness or some of that kind of lack of willingness to embrace AI has changed. In 2024, we're hearing them talk more about it on their earnings call. And of course, as they have previewed their developer conference in June, they've made it clear to the world that this is going to have an AI focus. And so when you hear AI focus, you should think Capex. And in the case of some of these companies, the mega caps, they're increasing their Capex in 2024 by 50 to 90%. And so Apple hasn't said as much about that, so I suspect that they will talk about that. I think that that could come at the cost of a couple percentage of margin in 2024 and 2025. And as far as is that in the stock or not, hard to say. I am a shareholder. I generally think that it's in the stock, because if you're following along with the AI conversation, you know to build generative AI, you have to significantly increase Capex. But of course, they historically haven't talked about that. So hard to say how much of that is built in, but I think investors should be dead-centered, focus on the Capex part of the equation going into this quarter's earnings. Second topic, now we're past the pressure point, is related to demand. The demand environment, of course, has been sluggish over the past couple of years. This quarter, Street's looking for revenue to be down 5% year over year. If you recall, when they reported their December quarter, they gave guidance for March when they talked about this decline. They also emphasized that part of it was related to some difficult comps for some factory closings back around the COVID period. And so there is some noise. If you back that out, the business would be flattish for March. Still not measurable growth, but either way you look at it, sales are sluggish. The iPhone is expected to be down 10% year over year, and China business is generally expected to be down 13 to 15%. Now, China just under 20% of revenue, and in the December quarter, that business was down 10% and down 3% in September. So we've seen the trajectory around China worsening. Huawei is having a positive impact. There's been a battery of third-party data out there saying that the iPhone is going to have a difficult quarter. So I think difficult quarter in China. So I think expectations for iPhone are pretty muted going into this print. The other piece around the demand equation is just other products. The services segment expected to grow at 11%. That's kind of consistent with previous quarters. That continues to do well despite talk about changes in Europe. And lastly is Vision Pro. This is a product that they're probably not going to say much about, just say that they continue to be positive about in the future, and they're not giving out existing metrics around it. My sense going into this year was this was just a building year, and don't expect much, that this is for Apple enthusiasts and developers, and that has in fact been the case. And I think that the one negative piece from my perspective, at Deepwater we also have a venture business, and we just haven't seen the velocity of businesses that are apps for Vision Pro that are building around that, kind of new companies that are coming out of the woodwork. I was hoping to see a little bit more by this time, but I think that the company is committed to this. I'm still a believer in the concept of spatial computing. And so the broader demand equation, to finish the thought about the demand part, it probably troughs in the June quarter. They probably give some punky guidance related to that. And I think investors kind of feel that as a relief, and the stock may actually even trade up based on bad June, because the back half of the year, things start to get more optimistic with a new iPhone in the fall. We've had 3 relatively weak iPhone cycles in a row, so we're due for a better cycle. Comps are pretty easy. And of course, they could add some AI marketing and mojo around the next iPhone, which could be good for sales in the back half of the year. So when you put that together, demand soft, but we should start to be able to see within arm's reach that things should be improving, kind of the mid-single digit growth. So that's the demand piece. Next, we're going to talk about AI and what they will announce at WWDC. I don't think they're going to say much on this call, but just as a reminder, where I'm at is that I think this is going to be more, the new products are going to be more related to generative AI into existing products, like into the OS and to their notes products, for example, to messaging, to be using generative AI around that, making Siri actually have a conversation with Siri. That would be nice. And maybe some simple functionality where third-party apps like Uber could build AI into it, where you could ask your phone, get me an Uber to the airport, and it would just take care of all of that. So I kind of put that as the stage 1 of Apple and generative AI services. And the second stage, which is probably a couple years down the road, is related to agentic AI or agent or personalized AI. Pick your the words that you want to describe this concept of AI doing more than just a simple task. It would be you asking AI to do something and it actually goes and resolves. My favorite example is I'm paying too much for my cable bill. Please go and renegotiate it. That is a real possibility around agentic AI in the future. And so we'll hear more, most likely at WWDC, related to what they're doing in AI. Next, I want to talk about the capital return policy. This is the period where they update it. Expectations are they're going to increase it by $90 billion. That's the same number that they did a year ago, so kind of a consistent increase. And they've kind of had to do that just to keep cash kind of slowly going down. Their goal is to be net cash neutral, which means their cash in their bank minus debt gets to zero. And right now they're net cash positive at about $65 billion. If they do the $90 billion, that probably is going to get the net cash number at the end of this year, probably in the mid $40 billion range from the mid 60 at the end of December. And so that's on the capital return policy side. And then last, to talk about the regulation piece, of course, the Department of Justice with their claims really sent a shockwave. I'm not going to get too much into this now, but feel confident that this is falling below the fold for investors, and it should. And the only piece I'll discuss right now is just related to the timing of everything. At a minimum, it probably won't go to trial until late 2025 or early 2026. I'm going to do more on this, but just kind of leave it with, number one, this is going to take a lot of time, and number two, I think the Department of Justice really doesn't have a case here. And there may be some small changes that Apple ultimately makes, but I think that Apple's in a great position, and I think that they won't say much, if anything, on this. Probably reiterate that they feel that they are in a good position, but beyond that, I think that this is just kind of going to be Department of Justice, more or less background noise for the near term. So that's a wrap. We'll see you after Apple's earnings. On behalf of Pressure Points, I'm Gene. Bye for now.